I wanted to turn my 2019 Toyota Tacoma into a mobile workshop that can charge all my power tools even when I'm working away from the grid. I added a Prinsu roof rack with a 100-watt solar panel from GoalZero. I used a deck system to provide tool and equipment storage in the 6-foot bed. I keep the batteries for the tools in their chargers, which is then plugged into a GoalZero power pack, which is kept topped off by the solar panel. The vast majority of my tools are battery powered, but if I do need to use a corded one, I can just plug in an extension cord and use my truck as a quiet solar powered generator. None of these modifications were that difficult, and here's how we did it. Let's start with the deck system, which has these 2 lockable drawers, and it comes with these really great toolboxes that fit right in. I've had this system installed in the truck for almost a year, but I wanted to really test it out and put it through the paces before recommending it. They have systems specifically designed for pretty much every make and model of truck. I just went to their website, put in the make and model, selected my options, and they sent me the whole system in this big box. The system is really durable without adding too much weight. Everything's either made out of an incredibly rugged plastic that is reinforced in strategic locations with steel. A lot of thought went into the design to make sure that it's weatherproof, and you can really see that with the attention to detail with all the gaskets. The installation starts by preparing the bed for the center beam that separates the 2 drawers and provides the majority of the support to the deck. There's a couple of spacers that go in between the ribs on the bed liner, and I just cleaned the bed liner with some alcohol and then stuck them into place. Now, it's really important for systems like this to be structurally secured to the truck itself, and the deck system relies on the hardware systems that are already installed in your truck. So I just removed these tie-down clips so that I can bolt the special mounting brackets for the deck system into these bolt holes. Now, there was a couple places where I had to drill through some of the plastic parts of the bed liner, but they give you templates for all the holes, and it's really easy to do. Now, for the rear brackets, it's helpful to have an extra set of hands to hold the nuts steady while you tighten the bolts. With the brackets in place, I started assembling the structure. Everything bolts on really easily to the center beam, and I temporarily installed the top deck pieces just to make sure all my holes were nicely lined up and that the thing was going together correctly. The majority of the structure is plastic, which is good because it keeps the weight down, but they have embedded steel threaded inserts that give you nice strong connections. Everything was going together well so far, so I just checked to make sure the tracks for the drawers would fit in place before taking off the deck pieces and putting it into the truck bed. I placed the center beam and then bolted everything to the mounting brackets. These 2 bucket-looking things support the back end of the deck and will create really handy compartments that you can access from the top. Next, I bolted in the steel tracks for the drawers and then installed the 2 pieces of decking. So far, the install had taken about 3 hours and it was starting to get pretty dark, but I at least wanted to get the drawers in before we called it a night. The drawer system design is pretty clever. It uses what are basically skateboard wheels with really heavy-duty ball bearings to guide the drawers, and I've used this in so many different situations with gravel, sand, all sorts of weird odds and ends crammed into drawers, and I've never once gotten them stuck. I installed the weather stripping on the end of the drawer and then was able to slam it shut for the first time. Now, you can add locks to the drawer, but I didn't bother because I just typically lock my tailgate anyways. I then secured the fasteners to the rear mounting brackets and was ready to crack a beer and call it a night. Oh yeah, there is a bottle opener built right into the backside. For tie downs, I have the side rails that came pre-installed in the truck, but the deck system also has these tracks to get bolted down to the deck. Decked also makes these waterproof gearboxes, which are great for stowing all of my equipment. I like organizing my tools by different categories. So for example, I'll put all the sanding disc and the sander in one box, the hand tools for minor repairs and mechanical stuff in another, and then clamps and measuring tools if I'm really setting up to do a big project in a different one. I also keep some emergency equipment in these drawers, like a survival shovel and a mini air compressor from Ryobi that uses the same batteries of my tools but is powerful enough to fill up my tires. It all fits in really nicely, and I still have the entire bed now for storing materials. My first use of this system was for relocating an outdoor lounge chair that I made for the container house. I was able to store all the components on top of the bed and still be able to access my tools to put it together from the drawers. Next, I want to test how good this drawer system is even when I fill the back of the truck with a load of 3/4 inch gravel. Now, I wouldn't advise this. You should definitely put a tarp down first, but I didn't have any problems with the drawers, and all I had to do was sweep out the crack between the tailgate and the truck bed. The deck for the system is rated to handle up to 2,000 pounds. Now, I didn't have anything quite that heavy, but I did test it out with this giant steel island that I made for Amanda Haas, which, when combined with the concrete slabs, weighed about 1,000 pounds. And it was really cool being able to access all the tools, even though they were underneath all that concrete. I really love this system, but that's enough evangelizing from me. Check out the link in the website. They have all the videos and a bunch of demos on their site. It's really well done, and in general, they're just really nice people, so be sure to check that out. For the roof rack, I'm using a Prinsu system that I got from CBI Offroad. I had Brett McAfee from Skull and Spades around, so he helped me out, and this whole thing went really fast. It's a really nice powder-coated aluminum system, just bolts together really simply, and we didn't even need to look at the instructions. The only dicey part is that we had to peel up the weather stripping on the roof of my truck to access these threaded bolt holes in the steel frame. We temporarily inserted some bolts just so we could line up the weather stripping and see where we would need to drill some holes. Now, at first I thought we could just drill right through the rubber weather stripping, but there's some embedded steel in it, so I used my rotary tool and just cut through that metal to make nice clean holes. From there, we just squirted in a little bit of silicone sealant, placed in the aluminum spacers, and we're ready to mount the roof rack. The roof rack is held down by 10 different bolts in 6 different locations, and the whole thing felt nice and secure. 1/4-inch carriage bolts slide into these tracks, and you could mount all sorts of different type of hardware on top of them. But I'm not interested in hauling cargo on the roof. I want to produce electricity with it. I got some 100-watt solar panels from GoalZero. Now, what I like about these solar panels is that they come already wired. So all I have to do is plug them into the GoalZero power station. No electrician involved, and I'm producing solar energy. Now, these 100-watt panels come with a stand, which is really handy if you're moving them around for camping or on a construction site, but I'm going to be mounting them permanently. So I took off this movable stand and then drilled holes in the sides of the aluminum rails so that I can attach them to these mounting brackets that came with them. I bolted the brackets on and then placed the solar panel on the roof rack so we could see how we would need to adjust these aluminum bars that can slide so that they would line up with these mounting brackets. Now, we easily could have fit 2 100-watt panels on the roof, but I was pretty sure one was going to be enough relative to how much I used the tools. So I just adjusted the aluminum bars and decided to go with that one at first. Now, the reason I wanted to place the panel now wasn't just to set the railings on the rack, but I also wanted to find a good location for drilling a hole through the roof of the truck so that I could run the wires from the solar panel to the GoalZero power station. Now, I'm not gonna lie, it feels really weird to be drilling a hole through the roof of a pretty much brand new truck, but go big or go home. I started with an 1/8-inch bit, and I immediately hit a steel bar that was reinforcing the cab, so I had to move my location just about 1/4 of an inch so that I could drill all the way through. The plug on the solar panel is about 1/2 inch in diameter, and I'm going to use a hole saw to cut through the roof of the truck, but I didn't want the hole saw to grab and mess up all the interior upholstery, so I just used my knife to cut away the insulation and the fabric lining so that the hole saw won't get caught up. The hole saw cut through cleanly, and I saw that there's sort of 2 layers of metal. One was the exterior sheet metal, and the other one was sort of an interior layer that was just a little bit thicker. The holes were a little bit jagged, so I just used my rotary tool with a grinding attachment to round over these rough cut metal edges. Now, I got these rubber grommets so that the wires wouldn't get frayed against the metal edges, and they just inserted right around each layer of the metal. Now, the inner layer of metal was right up against one of the structural members, so I just had to use a knife to cut away a little bit of the rubber grommet before sticking it in place. I also added in a little bit of duct tape in the gap. Now, weatherproofing this hole was the part of this build that I was the most worried about. But my buddy Jason Andrade from West Coast Sustainables gave me a great idea, and he said to use the flashing kits that are for installing solar panels on top of RVs. So I got this really nice black plastic housing which is UV resistant, and it comes in 2 parts. There's a lower ring that has adhesive on it that you can press down to the truck, and then the upper piece snaps over. And then there's also these little screw-on grommets that seal around the wires. I did a little test run with the solar panel just to make sure everything would fit before I drilled the holes. So I need to pull out the neoprene grommet on the little plug-in gaskets, and I couldn't stretch it around the plug head itself, so I just had to make a little bit of a cut in it so that I could then wrap it around the wire. The plug head itself can fit through the hard plastic eyelet. I cleaned the surface all around the rubber grommet, and then peeled off the plastic mounting bracket and pressed it down firmly. I then further secured it with self-tapping screws that were included. And even though the 3M adhesive should be plenty, just to be on the safe side, I used a little bit of silicone on the inside of the bracket. I then stuck the plug through the grommets and into the cab, pulled off the adhesive backing on the top piece, and then pressed everything into place. And once again, just to be on the safe side, added a little bit of silicone around the edges. And now we are able to bolt down the solar panel. And with that done, we were able to add on the wind deflector, which we had forgot to add to the roof rack. Now, one thing that I couldn't find a good off-the-shelf solution for was some way of finishing out the interior hole. So I decided to 3D print a grommet using my Pulse 3D printers from Matter Hackers. I just modeled up something really quick that only took about 45 minutes to print. And when I say I printed one, well, I actually printed three. At first I printed them a little bit too simple, and with these first two I would have had to glue them on, which I didn't really like doing in case I ever needed to remove them to rewire something. So with this third one, I made it a little bit bigger, and I also gave it a ledge around the perimeter that was about 1/8 of an inch high. This way I could use this 3M adhesive Velcro system so that I could Velcro it on or off, but the rim would still fit flush up to the surface of the upholstery. This system worked great, and I even think it looks pretty cool. Now, I value fully charged tools way more than I do a fourth passenger seat, so I pulled out the seat behind the driver's seat, and this was really easy. It just unbolts and comes out. And when I looked inside, I saw that I could use the same mounting brackets to mount the shelf that's going to hold the GoalZero. So I cut a piece of 1/8 inch plate steel and drilled holes that would line up with these mounting points. I had Brett weld up some spacers that'll bring the front mounting points up even with the back ones. Added in some bolts to test the fit, and so far so good. I then cut an additional piece of 1/8 inch plate that will serve as the top shelf. I use short pieces of angle steel as columns to support this second shelf. Now the GoalZero is pretty heavy, and should I get in a car accident, I don't want it flying through the air. So on the back side of the shelf, I welded in a steel strap. And on the front side where I'm going to access it, I cut an additional steel strap and drilled holes so that I could bolt it into place once the GoalZero is in there. Now there is some extra space under the bottom shelf, so I took some scrap angle steel and welded a bracket that will allow me to insert a drawer. For the drawer itself, I used smaller pieces of angle steel, and the front piece I cut so that it'd have a nice little handle to pull the drawer out. I welded it together using my handy little Forney, ground out the welds to get everything nice and smooth and ready for paint, and then coated all the steel parts with 2 coats of Rust-Oleum Rusty Metal Primer. I've had really good results with this primer. I've used it on everything from furniture projects to the container house. It's just really easy to apply, goes on smooth and even, and I haven't had any issues with rust or corrosion. Once the primer had fully cured, I then added 2 coats of Rust-Oleum protective enamel in a gloss dark gray. Now there are no mechanical slides, so I just cut some felt furniture pads that have adhesive on them and stuck those onto the bottoms of the drawer. And that way it'll be felt sliding on top of the steel. For the bottom of the drawer, I just polyurethaned a piece of 1/8 inch plywood and then hot glued that down. I bolted in the whole contraption and then slid in the drawer. For the battery system, I'm going to use the Yeti 1400 Power Pack by GoalZero. It's an all-in-one system. You can just plug the solar panel right in to charge it, or you can just plug in any extension cord to a typical socket in a home. The majority of my power tools are from Ryobi, and I just bolted on a supercharger that'll plug right into the GoalZero. For really big jobs, I occasionally use a hammer drill by Milwaukee, so I added a Milwaukee charger in too. Now I might be adding additional components, so I just use some stick-on cord managers and use some zip ties to keep everything tidy for now until I figure out if I want to add anything else. I use GoalZero systems throughout the construction of the container house, and they powered all of my power tools with the one exception being the welder, which I needed to use a generator for. What I really like is that they run completely quiet, and it's so nice to not have the generator on unless you absolutely need to. It's rare that I would use more than the 6 batteries that all fit onto the supercharger at once, or at least in one day. The one exception might be if I was doing a whole lot with an angle grinder, but the power pack itself is powerful enough to run a corded angle grinder directly off of that. Now my work encompasses a variety of different things. I'm going to be doing a lot more house construction over the next couple years, but I'll also be mixing in interior projects and furniture builds as well. So far the rig is serving me really well. Just from the ambient sunshine, the GoalZero is staying at about 95 to 100%. And even when I have a full day working and run down 4 or 5 Ryobi batteries, recharging those batteries is barely making a dent in the GoalZero's charge. Now an interesting test would be having a air compressor and a couple more chargers all hooked up to it. And when I start my next construction project, which will probably be off the grid, I'll give that a test and give you an update. When you're sizing solar electric systems, it's really helpful to think about the use case scenarios. So for example, if I was going to be building 7 days a week with a lot of power tool use, I would probably switch out the Yeti 1400 with a 3000 and add an extra 100 watt solar panel. Right now though, I'm only really building 3 to 4 days a week, which gives me plenty of ambient time in between to allow the solar panel to top off the Yeti. I'm also still experimenting with the best combination of tools and equipment to store on board. It's been really fun to try to figure out that right balance of not over cluttering the truck, but still being well prepared for a variety of different situations. This is my first time customizing a vehicle, and it was a really fun project. I still want to add a little bit more to this truck. I'm thinking about a bumper, maybe some sort of winch that I can use to haul stuff, as well as some sort of bed rack that I can hang additional equipment on. So if you have any recommendations for any of these types of components, be sure to hit me up in the comment section below. In general, I've seen a lot of cool truck mods that are sort of focused at the sort of off-roading or overland type stuff. That's great, and I want a little bit of that since I do drive on dirt roads on a regular basis. But more than that, I really want to focus on how to make this sort of my perfect Swiss Army knife for doing the type of making things that I really like to do. So one of the long-term projects for the truck that I'm kind of sketching out and working on the design for now is how to integrate some sort of panel saw. I really like the idea of being able to process a whole sheet of plywood on the truck itself and not to pull out a janky little job site table saw and cut it down there. So if you want to brainstorm with me, let me know how you use your truck or what sort of mods you've done that have been helpful for your sort of making activities. I would love to see it and open to all suggestions. Another example would be lights. I've seen a lot of LED light bars that go on the front of the truck, and I don't really feel like I need light there. I'm much more interested in something that could kind of swivel so that wherever I park the truck, I could actually use that to light up the workspace. Now obviously I could do that with Ryobi lights that use these battery systems, but any sort of LED system that's actually mounted to the truck that could actually swivel or move, I'd be really curious to see something like that. So we'll be doing additional truck videos in the future, but for now, if you just want to catch up on our DIY videos, check those out, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Thanks, bye.